running about 15 minutes late, dude. Everybody already left, but we got the little ABA here out of Guntersville. It's gonna be a full lake. There's about 330, 340 boats gonna be on the lake, including other tournaments. So let's go and see if we can find some real estate and catch a few fish. Bros and broettes, the first tournament of the year is in the books, and it went pretty well. We came in first place loser, second place, which is a little frustrating to me. I really wanted to win this one, but at the same time, like a top 5 finish, a top 3 finish, nothing to be, disappointed in, I guess is the right word. But what we're going to do, Hayden, my buddy Hayden won. He used to fish for the Alabama University fishing team. Super duper stick. Dude is good. He came in with, I think, like around 24 or so, and we ended up with 21. I think it was like 9.6, 9.7. My Rapala is a little lighter, so I thought I had like 21.8, and it was 21.9, so I get a little bump from the scales. But what we're going to do is I'm going to go through all the stuff that I used and kind of like the strategies that I was, going in with and kind of practicing throughout the day to try to close the deal on this ABA on Lake Guntersville. I'm going to give you some exact details, and I'm also going to let you in on, in my personal opinion, as I kind of reflect and look back at this, I lost this tournament in the first 2 hours of the day. 100%. That's where I blew it. So I'm going to kind of break that down for myself and for you guys. Hope you guys find it interesting. But hit that like and subscribe button for me. We're going to talk tournaments and do a little recap on this deal on Lake Guntersville for the ABA. So the plan for the day was I was going to tap into some of these school fish, offshore groups of fish, whether they're on a main river ledge or on some of these shell bars like grass ledges, secondary stuff, basically like hard spots, and really try to get to that 18-pound mark. That was my goal. If I could hit 18 to 20 pounds, I was feeling like I was golden, because basically what's been happening is I've been catching a few big fish in the grass, flipping. You guys know how much I love to punch mats and that, and I've been catching a few bigs. I can't catch them super consistently. I can't go and get 5 bites and catch 25 pounds in the mats, but I can definitely go catch one big one. Definitely, I say, for normally. Didn't happen today, which is what we're going to talk about. But, I went out there. I basically ran, there was a 300 boat plus tournament that was going on at the same time as this ABA, and I knew what I needed to do, because you got to kind of philosophize, how are you going to approach more people being on the lake, all these spots being occupied, all this traffic. And my approach was, I had a few kind of little sneaky schools of fish, and I wanted to see if I could get, they were all within, I had 4 of them, and they were all within a quarter mile, half mile of each other. So I'm like, dude, if I shoot down there right away in the morning, balls to the wall, fly down in the nitro, I can probably get on one of those places. And that's exactly what I did. I shot down. I didn't get on the one that I wanted to. If I had a top 3, I probably got on the second or third best of what I wanted to. But got out there. They were there, but it was kind of funny because I talked to Hayden actually after the tournament, and we were kind of chatting a bit, and for him the morning bite kind of sucked a little bit too, and that's exactly what I ran into. They weren't exactly set up, sat there for probably too long, probably about 30-40 minutes, ended up catching a 3.5 pounder using this hover rig, just this guy right here with a little Fluke style bait. That's a dual Realis pintail. One thing that I did wrong, and I know that right off the bat, is I rolled up and these fish weren't bunched up perfectly. They were kind of scattered around. And I'm like, you know what? I need to get a big bite right off the bat in the morning. And I wasn't wrong. So what I did is my first casts were this thing. This is a Bait Sanity Chimera. It's a big kind of chop glide style bait. And my thought is, dude, I don't care if I just catch one and then I blow the school, which is exactly what happened. If that one fish is 5 to 6 pounds, I'm golden, because my bite really didn't kick in until 9, 10 o'clock, usually. That's the way it's been fishing. So I threw that glide bait, and what really happened is it kind of spread those fish all over. They followed it twice, almost had one knock at it, almost had a great big one behind it that clunked it but didn't close the deal. And after I did that, I had really screwed up the school. So I squeezed out that 3 and change, and then I knew I needed to move. So we're about 45 minutes to an hour in. Everybody's out. Like I said, there's 325 boats on the water on this Saturday, and it was rough, dude. There was a lot of real estate that was covered up, but that's just something you have to deal with. So I popped around to another little school that's usually good from 1 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and a lot of this stuff is all about timing, hitting them at just the right section. And this is where I really screwed up.
I don't know if it was like morning nerves or just being a little sloppy in the morning. I got in there and they weren't potted up just like the first school I stopped on, but there were some scattered ones. So like I'd see like a group of 3 or 4 there, a group of 3 or 4 there, and I kind of just tried to target those guys. There were some spots mixed in with them, so I'm like, dude, even if I can catch some 3-pound spots, I'll build that limit up quick, get some confidence. So what I did is I picked up, I've been having a lot of success with this, and I've showed you guys it, but this little Gambler hover rig, it's a 16th ounce or a 3/32 with that dual Realis pintail. It's really annoying to throw. Throwing it on my finesse setup, Monster Bass. This is the Lunker stick with just a Daiwa Exceller, and all I'm doing is it's forward facing, it's hunting fish, you know. And what I really screwed up on is there weren't that many, and I went and hooked like a 3.5 to 4 and change, and I had it right up next to the boat. It was jumping, flopped, and it come off, and I'm like, that really sucks. I'm like, okay, cool. I gotta reset. There's gonna be more bites to have. My next like 2 casts, I hooked like a 5+. And I don't think I did anything wrong. The fish was hooked pretty close to the boat. You know, dropped that hover rig on her. She came up, smoked it. I'm like, this is awesome. It's good. And she jumped and did that backflip of death, dude. We all experience it. And I saw the bait just fly right out. And I'm like, are you kidding me, dude? Like, I need that one to get kind of this bump started. And basically after that, I think I caught another couple 2-pounders or something, you know, just fillers that I'd end up calling out later down the day. But it just kind of, it crapped the bed, dude. Or I crapped the bed, one or the other, probably a little bit of both. And I really just couldn't get bit out of there. And I thought that'd be a good big fish spot to try to get that starter kind of 1 or 2 fish over 4 pounds, and it didn't happen. So what I did is I basically started scrambling around at that point. And like I said, one of the biggest challenges to this day was finding real estate. You know, these guys were around here, and even guys who don't live here are coming. The ABT was happening, basically, the Alabama Bass Trail. Like, these guys know how to fish. They're some of the best fishermen in Alabama, dude. They find things you don't think you can find, things that you think you have all to yourself. And that's exactly what happened. You know, I started scrambling around. There's somebody sitting there, and then you start wasting time. I probably wasted about 30 minutes just running around all within like a 3-mile radius, trying to get on something and not having, basically, I'm not going to pull up on somebody. I don't roll up like that. Like, it's not my thing. Like, if you're on something, you're on it. It's yours. Do your thing. If you leave, I might slide in, but I'm not going to go pull up on somebody, ask if I can fish next to them, or ask them if they're fishing a tournament. I'm just going to roll on through and find some naked water and do my thing. So what I did is I pulled up on another pod that I was able to get up onto, and I was pretty lucky here, and something interesting kind of happened. So I ended up casting to them, and, you know, doing the forward-facing thing, doing the little twaddle-dwaddle with this hover rig like that. I ended up catching a few. I caught like a 3.5 or so, and another like 2.5, 3-pounder. Kind of got a little rhythm going, and then I picked up, and this is a little sneaky thing that I do. I picked up this Neko Rig. Basically just a little straight tail worm with a little 1/8 ounce, 3/16, 16th ounce. It all depends on the weight. It's got that little harness on there, so I don't have to rethread the worms all the time. And what I do with that is I fish it just like a dragging style bait, you know, just shaking it along the bottom. But what I found is these fish were really following, but they weren't closing. So what I'd do is I'd shake it, and then I put 2 fast reels in it and basically pop it off the bottom. It's what Tim from Hammond's Fishing Center over on Lanier, they do that a lot for spots to kind of trigger the bite. And that's exactly what I did for those largemouth, because full disclosure, the day before I'd pulled up on this spot and I should not have casted. I did that exact same thing, and I hooked like a 5 to 6 pounder, and it come off right next to the boat. And I'm like, oh, Mike, that was stupid. You shouldn't do that. So I used that, ended up triggering another probably pretty good one. I think it was one of my upper like 3s, almost 4 pounds, like 3.78 or something along those lines. A pretty donkey looking fish. But then it kind of tapered off. I couldn't get them to close again. And I'm like, dude, you got to quit looking at this screen. Like, a lot of these ledge fish that you usually catch and you've caught for the past like 4 or 5 years, you're catching them blind fishing. You're dragging, you're throwing maybe a spoon, something along those lines. So what I did is kind of backed off and got spot locked. I understood kind of how it laid out. Basically, it was a hard spot, like a shell bar that junctured with some grass. And I got out the old ball and chain. This guy right here. Just a little Carolina rig setup, 15-pound fluorocarbon to 20-pound fluorocarbon. And I just started slanging it around and fishing old school, like slow dragging. One little thing that I did, though, is I have a worm. Probably shouldn't tell you guys about this, but I'm going to. I have a worm that I absolutely love, and it is this guy. Now the irony to this worm that I absolutely love, this is a net bait flex worm, 7-inch, is yeah, they don't make it anymore. So I bought a whole bunch online. You can see I have a whole friggin' stash of them right here. And I was Carolina rigging that worm and basically just dragging it along, fishing super slow. And I think they had turned the current on a little bit because my Carolina rig would kind of get hung and I just keep tension on it. And I think that bait was actually just swooshing around in that. And one cool thing about that flex worm is it has all of these little like ribs and like little kind of curvatures. It acts a lot like I'd imagine like a beaver does, or that gambler stinger. So it's kind of undulating and kind of flexing in the water, like the flex worm name maybe. And I ended up catching a couple good ones, like 3.5s. So I basically filled my limit out. I think I came in around like 18, 19 pounds at that point. So for as much as the day started off kind of rough, it got pretty decent. The only problem is the closest fish that I had to a big was I think 392 or 378 at that point. And I really knew that if I didn't have one fish like over 5 in the morning, I was not in a good position. And that's the position I was in. I had a strong limit, but I just did not have that big, because what usually happens on these days, and that's what ended up happening, is you start hitting like 1 o'clock or so, noon, and it's not so much because the fish won't bite, because normally, you know, if you get out there on a Friday, or if you get out there when there's not that much traffic, they're still going to bite and you can rotate spots. But when you have guys hitting all these little pods of fish, you know, throwing baits at them, they get really trained and they get very hard to catch. So by the time you hit like 1, 2 o'clock, a lot of these fish have been rotated through. They've seen a lot of baits, they've had a lot of casts made to them, and they're a lot less responsive to just about anything, and they just kind of shut down. So what I decided to do is make another move. By now it's probably about 10 o'clock or so. Got a strong limit of about like 18, 19 pounds. I need to call up. So I hopped to another shell bar. The shell bar basically is a flat bar. It's not a river ledge. It's a flat bar with grass on it. And basically started dragging. I'm like, dude, I need to slow down. These fish aren't super responsive. I need to drag this Carolina rig and see if I can't call up a couple 4-pounders. And ironically, the first cast I made, I caught my biggest fish of the day and what tied for big fish, a 5.5-pounder, on that flex worm, dragging that Carolina rig and just kind of slow dragging it, feeling that shell, chink, 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 old school fishing, blind fishing, just casting it out, dragging, understanding the spot and the layout that I had in front of me.
Get in there. Now that's the kind of critter that we're looking for. Bro, I didn't even feel him bite it. She just had it all of a sudden.
So I caught that one all fired up. I'm like, dude, there's got to be some, like, because usually these fish during summer, they group in by size, especially on these smaller bars. So you'll get them like a group of 3 or 4-pounders, you know, 3 5-pounders. So I'm like, dude, I need to get back in there. And I think that's where I screwed up too, is I had to go and call out a fish. It took me a while. I had to put a new bait on. By the time I got back in there, it was probably 3 or 4 minutes later, and it doesn't seem like that long, but I feel like those fish kind of have like a little clicker timer. You remember those old oven timers where it's like ding? I feel like they have kind of a window once you get them fired up where they shut down and they disengage. They're like, hey, what's going on? When you catch one, they're like, I want one too. And then if you don't get back in there fast enough, you miss that window and you miss that opportunity at another bite. And that's what happened. I think we caught a couple more little ones out of that spot, but it just wasn't happening. So at that point, we're like 11 o'clock. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I've been catching some big fish punching. And I'm like, dude, I think I had at that point, I had like 29.6 or something like that. I'm like, dude, I'm in a good place. You know, like let's shift. Let's go for our one big fish. I think at that point, my smallest fish was like 2.8 or something, 2.7. So I'm like, I got a lot of space to call. I catch a 5-pounder, I bump up by 3 pounds, you know? So what we did is I got out my flipping setup. I actually have 2. This is a 1.25 with a burner crawl on 80-pound braid. Got a little 7.6. This is the Heavy Action XD3. Halo. This is kind of my lighter flipping setup, and then I had a 1.5 ounce with a Gambler Stinger on my other setup, and we went and we flipped hydrilla and junk mats, basically anything we could find. And dude, it was a grind. I had marked a few stretches where I had caught like a 6, I caught a couple 5s, and no bites. And what was interesting is I had pre-fished the weekend before because I wasn't able to pre-fish during the week because I got to work. And the week before, things were a lot more like isolated, and there was a harder line to things. When I got out there, because we've had such hot, beautiful weather, that grass had really grown up, so it had sort of like stopped the edge. The edge became all like sparsy, and like there was more grass that had grown up. And when you're doing this flipping game, it's a lot about having a hard edge. Those fish really relate to sort of that geometry of a hard edge or a juncture where junky grass meets hydrilla or something along those lines, and that had disappeared. Ended up catching I think like a 3.5 that helped me to cull a little doing that. But other than that, I got like no bites. So I'm like, bro, I need to sort of reevaluate what I'm doing. All in the back of my mind, I had one spot where I've caught some 5s. That's probably like a 40-yard stretch that I was basically going to hit at like 2 o'clock. It's freaking up there near the boat ramp. And I'm like, dude, I can roll in there at 2 o'clock. I don't know if it's going to work, but it'll be my Hail Mary. I'll go and flip those mats, shoot for that big bite. But in between, I'm going to go try to get back on some of these schools and see if I can't call up like a 4-pounder. Because the deal was, I had a small fish, I think of like 3 at that point or something along those lines. I catch a 4, I'm bumping up by a pound. I'm at like 21, 22, et cetera, et cetera. So I went and ran way back down south and just hopped around and like caught a 3-pounder. Called that one out, but then caught like another 2.5, a 2.7, a 3.2. You know, I caught all these like what I would consider awesome fish to catch, great bites, but I just could not bump up, dude. Whether I was dragging that Carolina rig, I tried throwing the Neko rig, you know, that guy right there. I threw a Texas rig. I threw the chatterbait a little bit. I threw that hover rig a bunch. I even threw a crankbait a little bit just to try to get a reaction. And it just did not pan out. I caught a handful of fish hopping around, but it just seemed like it went into a little bit of a lull. So by the end of the day, it was coming up on about 2 o'clock, 2:10. I was about to leave this one shell bar, actually the same shell bar where I caught that 5. And I went up, looked around, and I'm like, dude, I see a couple, you know, on forward facing. And I'm like, dude, I got to get out of here. Let me make like 4 drops to them, and then I'm going to GTFO. So I picked up this hover rig again and tossed it out there. And what's really cool about this hover rig is it fishes super duper slow, and it's a little bigger presentation with that weight, so I can kind of stall it above them. And I threw it out, didn't do nothing the first time, didn't do nothing the second time. Third time, I'm like looking down, and there's like a little pod of fish of like 3 or 4 of them following it. I'm like, dude, that's the best I can do, and then I got to go. So I'm, you know, dancing it around, making it kind of rock back and forth. That's what's cool with that Duo Realis is it has a little bit of a rock on it when you put it on that hover rig. And I had like 2 bigs, probably 5 or 6 feet in front of the boat. And normally when you get that close to the boat, like especially in the hotter weather times, during the winter I can catch them that close to the boat, but during the summer it seems like when they get that close to the boat they sort of disengage and shut off, and especially when that bait stops moving forward you can't catch them. So I got these 2 under the boat. I'm just kind of stalling it, not even moving it forward, just trying to keep it at the same level above their heads. And dude, I see this one blob just move over the bait. I didn't even feel a bite, didn't feel anything, and this is not the right way to do it. I went and friggin' pulled. Or maybe like in my subconscious I felt something tug on the bait. Well, I pulled, dude, and it was like a 4 and change. I think it was like a 4.4, 4.3. I don't know. It was over 4. And I'm like, damn, dude, that was pretty clutch. I didn't think I was gonna catch that one. So I catch that fish, I quick call it out and put it in the live well, and I'm like, all right, bro, you got like 45 minutes. You got to make something happen. So at this point, basically, I don't want to like be a spoiler. I had my limit. I had my 21.8 that I was gonna have. But I thought I could pull a clutch move, run up north, and go flip some mats and pull out one great big one and bump up to like 24, 25 pounds. So I shot up there, picked up this burner craw, and went to it. Started flipping these hydrilla mats. They were anywhere from 3 to 7 feet of water, just punching on through. I'd punch through, and what I found is basically a majority of my bites were coming on the drop, but I'd still kind of lift it up and dangle it under the mats. There's a lot of brim swimming around shallow, which is interesting because the little twist to the story is a lot of these guys in the ABT actually caught them shallow. My buddy Austin Shields, who actually got, I think he got like 4th or 5th, he had 19 pounds, caught them all shallow. There were a lot of brim up shallow, so you could roll into these mats and these grass areas in here, like those brim popping. So I'd want to kind of pull it up under the mat and stall it, because those brim, especially in the middle of the day, would be under those mats kind of like swimming around, and those bass would just come up and eat them. So I flipped my stretch, dude, and I had shaken off like a giant in there the day before, and I'm like, bro, please bite again. So I'm pitching, nothing. All of a sudden, and I'm like, bro, right in the same place where I'd freaking shaken off that giant the day before. I'm like, this is it. So she's all balled up in the grass. I'm fighting. Bro, it's a 3.5. And I'm like, and any other day I'd be absolutely stoked to catch a 3.5. But like on a day like this, I needed that 4 to 6 pounder, 4 to 7 pounder. And bro, it wasn't that. We went down another about 10-15 yards of the mats. We were starting to hit like 250 or something like that, 253. I don't like being the guy that squeezes in right like late and that like, you were like a minute or two late. I like to get in there and keep it honest, you know. So I picked up and I'm like, I got what I got. I'm gonna send it on in. So that was my day. Key baits, Carolina rig. The punching thing, even though it didn't work out, that could have been a key. I think it was worth taking that risk, because you're not going to catch 5 great big ones right now doing it, but it was worth trying to catch that one big one. The hover rig was pretty clutch for me too. It was a super simple, I mean, it's basically like fluke fishing, and it's hard to beat a fluke for catching bigs and catching numbers, which is a perfect limit thing. And then that Neko rig and doing some fun things with it, doing that quick reel. The glide bait didn't play for me. I know a couple other guys caught them on it. I could not get them to close, and I don't know if it's because the fish were in a weird mood, or at least the schools that I was fishing were in a weird mood, or by the time I actually started throwing that glide bait quite a bit, they had seen so many baits that they weren't willing to commit. But the biggest mistake that I made, and this is something that I need to get better at, you know, it's always good to kind of reflect, and like had a good day, right? Got 2nd place. I'm proud of that. I'm positive about that. But you need to be critical because you didn't win, right? So where was that gap that you didn't close? You know, what would have put you over the top? Because you always got to be doing your ABCs. Always be closing. And when I look back, even though the morning was tough, when I was talking to Hayden, he's like, dude, I caught some great big ones and lost a great big one right away in the morning. Not a whole bunch. They weren't super active. And I think that's my key. One of my biggest weaknesses is getting out there in the morning and getting a couple big bites. I'm not talking about finding a school and catching a limit. I can do that stuff. But committing to running like 2 or 3 things for the first hour to 2 hours of the day to try to get that great big bite, whether it's going and fishing grass, flipping, maybe throwing a top water, throwing a buzz bait, maybe throwing that big glide bait, throwing a chatter bait, doing something like that, or if it's fishing offshore and just picking a couple schools that aren't maybe a ton of fish but offer some big fish. The other thing I regret is not getting on the spot I wanted to get onto, but that's just one of those things where, you know, I can piss and moan all day. When you have that many boats on the water, you're going to need to be malleable. You need to be flexible, because you're not going to get on all the stuff you want to get on. So if you're not willing to open your mind and just kind of bump around, pop around, you're going to be SOL. But I really need to work on that or that early morning deal. I need to learn how to catch 1 or 2 big ones in the morning, because from 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock, I can catch them, dude. I can find them, but finding that great big one in the morning to kick you up and get you started, and then kind of backing it up with a couple 4s, a couple 5s later in the day, that's how you're going to get 25, 26, 27 pounds. And that's what I want to do one of these days. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys got any insights or recommendations, you guys know fishing as well, or probably better than me in many ways, drop them down in the comments box. I'm really curious kind of what your analysis of my day was, to get some feedback on it. I'll put links to all the baits we talked about at Monster Bass and Tackle Warehouse down in the description box. But a pretty epic day. We're going to fish another one of these sometime in July, maybe even in a little derby, to kind of learn and kind of go through this process, get a little more comfortable with it. But all in all, a fun day. You can't complain about 2nd place, but 2nd place is first loser. So we want to put a W down on one of these. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit that like and subscribe button for me. I will catch you later, maybe doing some pre-fishing or talking in another tournament.